Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Good morning or afternoon, good day, good evening, good night, depending on what time it is for you when you're listening to this, wherever you are. A little nod to the Truman Show there. Today, I'm going to be talking about the notion of hero jobs and how they're falling out of favor. I was recently part of a panel for civil service and public safety testing, and I was talking about a lot of trends and successes and lessons learned from my stint in recruiting and hiring. But not just that, it's just one piece of the puzzle, and I'm glad that we talked about the integration with first responder culture and the success of teams and organizations, which is to absolutely talk about training, and it's absolutely to include talking about retention. And what is retention? What comprises the elements of retention? And without going super deep into the weeds, I think you could summarize it and boil it down to culture. Like, what kind of culture do you have in your agency? What kind of culture is your leadership mapping out and setting the tone for and modeling? And then that trickles down. But it also, and this is my spin, always, I truly believe it, regardless of the different roles or ranks I've had, culture needs to go outward from every point of a person in the organization. And it is made in a lot of times more significantly in every point. And so it is to say that everyone has an active role in culture and an active responsibility to contribute towards the culture that you want to see and you want to see grow in your agency. So culture doesn't just trickle down, it absolutely trickles up. And the point of this podcast episode is not really to talk about culture significantly. It is a central theme of what I talk about, what the guests come on and talk about on this show, or what I write about in the articles or the posts that you may or may not be watching or reading along with. But the point of this is to talk about the notion of hero jobs. And in that discussion, the panel, a video was featured, and it was a news clip where the reporter was talking about how there's a drastic drop in the pursuit and desire to be a part of these quote unquote hero jobs, and how there are a lot of social media influencers that are, as they said, de-influencing our youngest generation, or I suppose our youngest young adult or adult generation, to pursue these jobs. And a lot of the themes have to do with the responsibility, the inflexibility at times for work-life balance in these hero jobs. And so they are first responder jobs, police, fire, medics. They are dispatch jobs. They are corrections jobs. They are medical jobs, right? Hospital workers. You could even argue in a lot of ways they're these jobs that might have these additional pressures and the gravity of their role, right? And you're serving in this way. So it could be mental health workers, it could be crisis responders, it could be teachers in a lot of ways, especially folks that know teachers. Like for those especially that are working with, well, part of me wants to say challenging communities, but if we look at the landscape of society right now, what kids are going through, the kind of world that they're coming up in, the kind of world that we're trying to bring them up in, that is a challenging community regardless of where you are. But certainly social economic factors can be an exacerbator on that. But to circle back, yeah, there's this movement where there's a lot of folks just saying, hey, like, don't go into these jobs. Don't pursue these things. Like, you're going to put your life and your happiness, your satisfaction, you're going to put it second by virtue of the job. And you're also going to experience burnout. And these are relevant conversations. I mean, clearly I'm in first responder work, and so I don't agree with the take, but I hear the concern. And so what do we do with that? And you all know that this is why I'm just one of many, many people that are beating the drum on first responder wellness, on wellness awareness, on post-traumatic stress awareness, on all these things and factors we can focus on and contribute towards to build resilience. But the notion of how we shouldn't, or how our young folks shouldn't be pursuing these hero jobs is an interesting one. This is a generation that in a lot of good ways is more emotionally intelligent than prior generations, mine included, right? And don't take that offensively. We have more data, we have more socialized information on how to be emotionally aware, self-aware, aware of others. It's integral to relevant leadership training these days, how to be an effective communicator, where it wasn't, decades ago. I mean, that's just what it is. It's a frequent conversation in management, in corporate leadership, private sector, all that stuff, military, right? Like it's just a more relevant and prominent conversation for good reasons. This generation that's coming up also has the highest degree of awareness with mental health and emotional health and the stressors, and that's good, right? I hear some more traditional folks say that they ought to not hyper focus on these things, but like we're going to get in the weeds there. So let's just recognize the good in that. Let's recognize the value in that awareness and see the landscape for what it is. So in the last few days, I actually saw a post from the Wall Street Journal, and it focuses on how there's more and more young adults that are living at home. And the title is actually America's Young Men Are Falling Even Further Behind. So men in their 20s and early 30s are more likely than female peers to live with their parents, and many say they feel aimless and isolated. And so why am I bringing this up? I think that when we think about hero jobs and the drop in them and how people are being encouraged to avoid them for the purpose of self-preservation and avoidance of burnout, man, it's like I'm thinking on the fly, but the opposite of burnout in this situation is like you can't even light a spark. And so where my mind goes is, how do you want to live? And I know I'm preaching to the choir in this circle, but there's a point to me bringing this up, and we'll get there. But one piece is we have to recognize that there's a chunk of the population that's being enticed by this lack of purpose, right? Like we come into first responder work and whether it's the medical field and military service and service unto others through teaching, working with kids, helping the vulnerable. And it is so purposeful. And I'd be remiss if I could imagine a life of value without strong purpose. And so whether you want to call it a hero job or just a career of devoted service, I mean, that gives purpose. It gives value, self-worth. And I'm looking back at this, kind of subtitle to the post, and with extreme value provided to others, I can't imagine someone feeling so aimless and isolated. And I can't imagine someone feeling or falling so far behind in the game of life, as it were, or in their personal developmental progress. So again, those listening, are often in these spheres, right? Like you're listening and you're following along with content, including mine or like mine. You are into self-development. You are trying to be the best for yourself, for your circles, your family, your workplace, the community at large. And so that's fantastic. And you're probably some parts eye rolling some of the points brought up because it's frustrating to hear. We're trying to make things better, and some people are so dejected and disconnected. But I think that we have a huge opportunity here. And by virtue of our work, whether we are teachers or counselors or cops, we have so much impact. We have so much opportunity to influence and connect with people in our day-to-day. We also have so much opportunity to mentor and impact younger generations, whether it's in our own fields, to help them step up, help them invest, help them find purpose with balance, right? You know how I feel about wellness, support, all these critical topics. So how do we do it meaningfully? And then also, going back to the entrance point to this whole discussion is like in hiring and recruiting, why not lean into that? And in reflection, that's what we did in large part when we were defining what made our agency great, what made our people want to be at our agency, and the type of people want to be at our agency, what our agency attracted, and the type of people that succeed in our agency are people that are extremely purposeful, extremely driven to be busy, to be engaged, to lean into the hard stuff. And that's what we built a lot of our brand off of, right? So I talked about recruiting quite a number of times on here. And although I'm not in the seat anymore, it's, as I said when I was in recruiting, everyone's a recruiter and everyone has to put that hat on, right? If you're concerned about the state of policing and you're a few years out from retirement and there's a teenager that lives down the street and he's trying to ask about your cop job and all you have to say is counting down the days, I mean, how are you leaving the state of our profession? I mean, there's value to being honest. There's value to showing both sides of the coin, but you got someone that's willing and invested in being purposeful and mindful and trying to pursue a greater purpose. And if you're just actively discouraging it, I mean, it's stuff we got to be aware of, right? So we are all recruiters for our professions. And I'm not just talking about hero jobs here. I'm also trying to expand this conversation into how we interact and how we model and how we lead those generations that would follow us. And I think that's a prompt that's just as relevant for the younger generation that are listening. For you all that are listening, you are the future leaders. You are the future industry leaders. You are the innovators. You're the game changers. You're the disruptors. You're the progressive drivers of change, because that's how things develop. That's how things evolve. And you're going to continue to be doing this job long after me or anyone else that comes on the show is going to be doing it. You're going to be sergeants. You're going to be command staff. You're going to be chiefs and sheriffs out there doing this thing. So it's not about me. It's not about my message. It's about a theme of encouragement and being positive, because you're going to be carrying the banner. You're going to be picking up that torch, and you know why you do what you do. You know why you're in this quote unquote hero job. And I think it's really important and valuable to recognize that, to take stock at times, to reflect on that, because sometimes we need to remind ourselves why we got into this in the first place and not just focus on the negative, right? We don't even have to look at the negative. It will find us. It permeates in the media. It permeates in our social circles, even at work, right, with our peers. Sometimes not intentionally. It just happens. So we need to be continually, purposefully thinking about the positive and remembering our why, remembering our purpose, so that we can best navigate that and also not just bring ourselves up and keep ourselves resilient, but bring up others, right? That buddy check. Sometimes it's that nudge, just getting grounded again, helping someone remember why they do what they do. And a lot of times when you have those conversations, especially when it's one-on-one or just in small groups, sometimes the roll call or the large hallway or break room conversation can get a little spun up. But when you talk to people, I find in ones and twos, smaller groups, more intimate settings where people are just a little bit more open and trusting, then yeah, a lot of us really quickly can recognize, yeah, we're venting, we're being cynical, but ultimately, like, we know why we're here. And could things be better? Sure. But things could certainly be worse. And by taking stock and finding that gratitude and that, that, I suppose, that reinvigoration of purpose, that can be so helpful for individuals and for teams, certainly for me. So I hope this was helpful. As always, let me know what you think. Send me a message, DM me, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram or bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts and let me know your feedback points. One really cool thing on a couple posts recently is just getting messages, getting emails or texts, from those that are, nearby or closer to my circles. And not just that, not just so I know what's working, but sharing that out, I'm getting a lot more responses, right? So there's been some messages that say that an article or a post or, an episode really resonated for this reason, and then they provide an example. And that's like absolutely the feedback loop that we need to keep going, because I share a clip, I share an anonymous post or a response. I post about it with some reflection and some explanation, and then more people are commenting and liking and sharing back their feedback, right? Because that's the whole point of this. This is to drive positive, constructive reflection and communication. We are a community, and we're building to do our best for ourselves, for each other. And that's been a really meaningful byproduct to starting to say more things and hearing what other people have to say and contribute as well. So with that, I'll leave you to it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the support. Thanks for sharing, as always. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.